Hello, I'm Richard Vince, and this is another Brain Dojo broadcast. And today I'm going to be talking about how our minds can be like forests, or like a wood, maybe, if you don't want to think of it as a forest, a small copse even. But it doesn't matter. The point will become clear, hopefully, when I've explained my thinking. So. I've made some video inserts that I'm going to cut to from time to time on this, and hopefully they will help to illustrate what my thoughts are. But I suppose what I'm trying to put across is uh, brains are complicated, minds are complicated. We we have an infinite number of experiences and inputs into our mind, and when they're all linked together, when they're all interacting inside there, the chances of one person thinking or acting or being like another person are so small that it's freakishly unlikely. So let's have a look. Let's look at this analogy. So as I said, I'm going to compare our minds with a wood, a country wood, a place where there are trees and shrubs and little creepy crawlies and all sorts of things. So let's look at our minds from a distance. So you look at a person from a distance, and there are similarities. Most people speak, most people walk and look around. Obviously, if you're blind or disabled, you don't walk or look around, and those are obvious visual differences that you see straight away. Most people have two arms, two legs, and again, I understand that there are variations from that, but I'm just looking at the vast majority of people, and to say that these are things that we sort of assume about each other, and I think any of us would be, I don't know if surprised is the right word, but we would think it was unusual or less usual if somebody had an arm missing or a leg missing or they were in a wheelchair. It wouldn't be something we would consider the most usual thing. And I'm certainly not being whatever disableist or whatever the ists are. I don't even know what they are, but I'm just saying, from a general perspective, we tend to look at people and we have a general thought about them. And that thought may be influenced by their clothes and what they're doing, or their hairstyle, or their skin color, or all sorts of things can be, or their appearance can make a huge difference to how we initially perceive them. Now, as we get closer to that person, either physically closer or emotionally closer or intellectually closer, as we know more about that person, then of course we start to notice that there are things that are different from ourselves, and that really has to be the definition of different, doesn't it? If someone's different, what we really mean is, well, they're different to me. They're different to the other person that I met the other day. And so they're different to what you've experienced. And really, that's the only thing that different means, isn't it? It's not what you're used to or what you're expecting, or it's not exactly what you are. So that's the first thing that we need to understand. So let's go back to the wood analogy, the forest analogy. You can look at a forest and think, well, yeah, it's trees. In the summer, green at the top. There are stems, the trunks of the trees. They're a bit greeny browny, and then it goes down onto the ground. You might have ferns and leaves and bits and pieces. Again, greeny brown. If there's a lot of earth under the trees, if there isn't much growing there, then it'll tend to be more brown than green. But those are big things that we notice, and we think, yeah, okay, I've got this. You see a wood in the distance, you think, wood, that's a wood, that's a forest or a copse or whatever. It's a bunch of trees together. They look like trees. So then, as we get in, we notice that, or we can notice, and this is the thing. This is why I think the analogy between our minds and a forest or a wood is so useful, because we can walk into that wood and notice almost nothing about it. We'd say, yeah, trees, yeah, just what I expected. Trees, ground, grass, weeds, yeah, nothing much here to see. Or we can look at what's actually in there and think, wow, if this is anything like how a person's mind is put together, is constructed and interacts, the various parts of it interact, then it's so complicated, isn't it? You got to look and say, wow, it's so different. So let's say you get towards this wood and you go inside the first sort of 2 or 3 trees, and you notice that there are not just greens and browns. There is probably every colour there that you can ever think of. Some of the little weeds may have purples and reds and yellows. Weeds, wildflowers, whatever you want to call them, the things that grow there naturally. They may have all sorts of colours. There'll be some large trees, some smaller bushes, some shrubs, some woody little teasels and brambles and this sort of thing, and then maybe some green nettles and clover, and so you've got such a variety of things growing there. Then look at the types of trees. You may have ash and oak and maple and birch and all sorts of trees in that forest, in that wood. And each variation that you see there, you think, well, yeah, but that could be different. That tree there is an oak, but it could just as easily be an ash, because there's an ash there. And if the seeds had, or if the person who planted the wood had done it differently, because some woods are put together by a person, and the illustrations, the films that I've used, the film excerpts I've used here, I know that this wood was put together by a person, because when I first moved to the place where I live now, these trees had just been planted. So, I know that it was planted by a person or by a group of people, because all the trees were in these protective sheaths and whatever. So, in this situation, it isn't something that started out as something that was by chance. The initial trees were put in as part of a plan. Everything else that's happened around it is, pretty much down to nature. So you've got all of these various things going on, and all the time I'm talking, I want you to think about how this relates to a mind. So if you say, I know that these trees were planted, they were planned and planted and put in with care and love and whatever. That could be your parents putting things in your mind, saying, this is blue, this is red, this is yellow, this is hot, this is cold, those are the things that are planted, put in our minds intentionally to help us. Just like the person who put those trees in the ground and put the protective sheath around them and put them a good space apart so they had room to grow and whatever. And then, of course, once those things are in place, just like the forest, we're sort of pretty much left to our own devices. And somebody may come and do a bit of pruning and a bit of weeding and plant an odd tree here, especially if one dies and there's a bit of a space or whatever. But that's us. That's how we then run our lives when things start to get going. You've got you've got large, obvious plants. You've got as I said, you come down to the smaller shrubs and the weeds and whatever. Some of those plants grow fast. Some of them grow quickly. Look at how the branches and the trees intermingle, and I think the way that trees intermingle is fantastic. But if you go down to ground level and look at the way that shrubs and wildflowers interact with the trees on the ground level, I just think that's absolutely amazing. They all have their space, they all fit into the space that's available, and they all do the best with what they have. They all find a way to get on in that environment. Although some things grow quickly, some things grow slowly, some plants will smother other plants. I have a real dislike of ivy. I just think it's such a vindictive plant. It grows up a tree and then squeezes it. And I spend an awful lot of time on my property stripping ivy off trees to make sure that they're not smothered by it. But that's just a personal thing. And I can't see any good reason not to, but if any of you know of a good reason not to, let me know. Some people will weed out things in their mind. They will go and look for things in their mind that are things that they would prefer not to have, and they will do their best to discard them, get them out. Other people pay no attention and let anything flourish in their mind that gets a foothold. Anything that gets dropped on the floor and squashed into the ground is going to grow, and that's fine. And again, I'm not being critical. It's some people just have a very fertile mind that allows anything to grow. Other people are much more selective about what they allow to grow in their mind, in their forest. Plants are like thoughts. They intermingle and they affect each other. So one thought growing will affect another thought over here. Things that you perhaps thought were totally unrelated will come together at some point. You'll think, wow, I had no idea that this thing here was going to affect this thing. And and that's something that happens in forests and woods all the time. You have one plant that comes to another, and either they'll get on, maybe one can be a climber in the other and do really well, and maybe not. Maybe one will just completely overwhelm the other. Mistletoe is a good example, isn't it? You around here in East Anglia, we have lots of mistletoe growing in trees, and that to me seems like a very harmless parasite, because the mistletoe isn't part of the actual tree. It just grows on the tree, doesn't it? And as often as not, those mistletoe seeds are spread by birds, and that's why you tend to get lots of it around, in a certain area. But it's a good example of how different things can get on in a wood, in a mind. So even if we have in our minds mainly what we prefer, there are always things that come along that may disturb the balance. You may have torrential rain. It disturbs the soil. It makes a difference to the soil. You may have enormous winds. Maybe it blows some of the trees over. Maybe it breaks branches off. Maybe it slightly changes the shape of the wood. You have insects, creepy crawlies. Some things will grow into trees and destroy them. Other insects will make the plant more healthy and make it thrive even better. Birds, obviously, birds live in the trees. Lots of birds live in the trees. They spread seeds around. All of these things affect what's growing in the wood. And I say birds live in trees, but obviously they live in bushes and whatever and things as well. Droppings, the wild animals that are there, they'll all have droppings. They'll all have an effect on the fertilization aspect of what grows there. Seasons, of course, and if you so going back to those things that affect the forest, it's just like our minds. These different things affect our minds. Like I said, wind, rain, insects, and all these things. But another similarity that I believe exists is with seasons. Now, I think there are seasons in a person's mind, from child to youth, to young adult, to mature adult, middle-aged, on and on. And you can categorize these things with all different words. But what it amounts to really, there's seasons, aren't there? If you imagine just running through the seasons that we have every year and making some comparison. Autumn. Now, I think autumn is very symbolic of letting go. Just letting things go, let the dead stuff fall away, the stuff you don't need anymore. Just jettison it. Let go. Let the things you don't need go and get ready. Have a rest, ready to start again. Winter. That's your recharging. That's when you gather energy. That's when you think, I've jettisoned all those things I didn't want in autumn. I'm just going to get myself together, gather myself, and when that first light of spring arrives, when the warmth starts to occur again, wow, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to push, and I'm going to work, and I'm going to really surge and see how I can progress and make my life more of what I want. And then summer, we're fully operational. Everything's at full tilt. The sun is shining. The weather is warm. Everything's growing like crazy. Everything's perfect. And that's so similar to our lives, isn't it? Our lives can follow patterns very much like that. And I think it's a really nice analogy. This is key. None of us can know what's in somebody else's forest, what's in their mind. You just can't know. You have been through a process. Excuse me. Your mind has been experiencing whatever it's experienced. These wild animals, that wind, this rain, those encroaching plants, those weeds, those wildflowers. Somebody else's mind may have just had one thing different, and their whole outlook is different. But imagine how different their outlook could be if they had several things that are completely different to yours. When you had plentiful water and fertilization and sunshine, maybe they didn't. Maybe they struggled. Maybe there are bald patches or dead patches in their forest that you don't have. So, we really can't know anything about it. Even if you took, say, 5 square meters of the same forest. So you took 5 square meters and then you took another one a few feet away. Even those two wouldn't be the same. There might be similarities because they're close, but they wouldn't be the same. And that's what I'm saying. We can't expect anyone to be exactly the same as us. And they may be completely different. They may have a completely different makeup of their forest, of their mind. Let's go back to this planting thing. Maybe one person put this thing together. Maybe your parents, planted these things in your mind, or maybe other people have planted things in your mind, and maybe they were great things, or maybe they weren't. Right? So what we have to do is say, that may have happened to us, but it also may have happened to this other person. This person I'm trying to interact with. I can't understand why they don't get this thing that I'm trying to put across to them. Well, maybe they had some different things planted in their mind. You were fortunate you had this, and this that's helped you to think this way. Well, maybe that person had one of those things missing, or everything was different. So their whole outlook is going to be different. And to me, the forest is a really good example of that, because it's so easy for somebody else to come and plant something. And another similarity with the forest, would you know if somebody planted something? Could someone sneak in in the dead of night and plant a couple of badly influencing plants in there, or really well influencing plants, brilliantly influencing plants, plants that give super health, or insects that give health. Maybe they put a hive of bees in there somewhere. You just don't know, do you? So we don't know what the owner of this mind, this wood, we don't know what he's been trying to plant. We don't know how successful or unsuccessful they've been. Sorry, just knocked my cup over. We don't know how successful or unsuccessful they've been. We don't know where their efforts have been placed. We don't know. We don't know. That's what I'm trying to say. We really don't know. And I suppose the whole purpose of me trying to say that there's a huge similarity between a mind and a forest is to help us all be more understanding of each other and just appreciate and understand each other, really. Appreciate the differences. You can look at one section of a forest and then move a few feet away and look at a different section, and it looks different, but it's still beautiful. It's still lovely. It's different. It doesn't have to be the same, but it's got incredible beauty. And maybe you turn and face the other way and there's a different forest made up with a different type of trees and different ferns and small shrubs on the ground, and it's beautiful as well, but it's different. And I think I have lots of thoughts when I'm out walking my dogs, and I must admit the thought about this broadcast came to me when I was walking the dogs through this wood. And I took my phone out and I made the video recordings that I've inserted here, just to help us understand, really, that and it just seemed obvious to me that this wood was just like someone's mind. We have no idea what's growing there. Some of us have a lot of control over what's growing in our own mind. Some of us don't. Some of us are aware and some of us aren't. But really, just accept that somebody may be struggling to make their forest grow the way they want it to grow. Maybe you can help, maybe you can't. But you can always choose to not hinder. You can always say, I'm not going to make this any more difficult for you. I may be able to help you, or maybe I don't have the tools to help you. But either way, I'm not going to make it worse. I'm not going to make your struggle any harder. And hopefully, thinking about this wood analogy, this wood comparison, will help you to understand just how different things can be for different people. All right, I'm going to leave it there again. If you have any comments, put them down here. Any questions, I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability. If I don't know, I'll try and find out something for you. And I hope you've found this useful and you've enjoyed listening. And I'll speak to you again soon.